as I recall, there was a statement about people would come to visit their community because they were searching for a nostalgia of a wholesome life in the past.
Mhm.
That maybe that you could recover that.
Mhm.
And at the same time, he talked about previously, they only wanted to deal with what I would call sacred things, like keeping their farm going, or keeping their community strong. And they finally figured out of a list of 7 or 8 things, it was the eighth thing on the bottom, which was micro,
Enterprise.
yes,
Enterprise.
Yeah.
Enterprises.
enterprises that
Exactly.
they were able to hang on to.
Exactly. I found that part, talking about those 7 different things that they tried. I keep thinking about what is, how that demonstrates imagination, that they've tried this and they've tried this and this didn't work and this didn't work and this didn't work. And they just, and now they feel like they know what works. But they tried and tried and tried, and it reminds me, I often forget that there's so many answers to something. We usually stop after 1 or 2 tries and say it was not going to work. And it was a great story to be able to say they kept trying until they found something, and now they're pretty focused or something, it felt
But
like.
it was also staying clear on their core.
Yes.
That the success of those 7 were judged not just on the success of one aspect.
Yeah.
They were judged on the success of these core principles or values or intentions. And within that frame, number 7 was the only one that could sustain that. The other 6 dealt with different pieces, but they didn't sustain the core values or core principles. I'm complete.
So as I wrestled with this chapter, I felt like I kept saying, so what is he saying is this practice of imagination, and how is he using, how is he describing an imagination? And partly because we have had so many ways of talking about image change and visioning, et cetera, et cetera. And so where's the overlap? So I'm going to share something with you that I don't know how helpful it is, but we'll see. But do you see this chart?
Yes.
So I went through and I highlighted what I thought were words that he used to describe in each of his sections, how he described the practice of imagination. So you see up here the Amish section.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Amish section for a minute, and which ones of those descriptions did you find yourself resonating with? Can you read them, or is it too small?
No,
I
it's
read it.
fine.
To make it a little bigger.
A little bigger. I'll see if I can. That made it a little smaller.
Oh.
How did that happen? Whoops.
There you go.
Is that bigger?
That's big. That's good.
Okay.
I was
Look.
struck by
Really big.
I was struck by the lines that are underlined in red.
Okay.
Pulling
because
together
they're-
multiple resources with revising them.
Which resource?
Yeah.
And the other thing that they did was they're playing to a market for nostalgia
Yes.
and doing microeconomic projects around the interest of tourists in being the market for them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
it may be that some people in that community couldn't see their way to do that.
Mm,
But the prophetic in the context of the Amish is being able to see what the resources are and imagine a new way of putting them together.
mm.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's good. And
Yeah.
also that will something new being born out of the old. That's close to what Marshall was saying, but yeah, that struck me in that list.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
think of the Amish that way. I think of the Amish being stuck in the past and all those old images, but creating something new out of that oldness.
So I would be curious as to where did the prophetic come into the Amish community?
Hmm.
How did that
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
if they were so stuck in the past? I
Okay,
am
well.
very curious about
And
that.
and maybe we're wrong. They weren't stuck in the past. I mean, that's what I think is helpful about what he's writing is we may have thought that, but look at this. You know, he's saying, look what they've done.
But I
So-
think that's part of the grief piece is
That's later.
I know, but the reason they were able to make the transition into imagination was partly the pain that they were experiencing and his case, he mentioned the 80s, et cetera. But that in that space of our current model is failing.
Mm-hmm.
And in their case, not just their economic model, but their cultural model.
Yes.
How do we sustain the culture and survive? And so they had to go through a grieving process in order to
Mm.
come up with that list of 7. So I felt like the prophetic was born out of the grief, not out of the hope,
Mm.
which, and I don't know that that's true, but that's just sort of the flow that I felt in the chapter.
Okay.
The interesting thing, though, is that it's not just sustaining. I mean, they were sustaining. The issue was growing, expanding, and being able to include many who were not feeling as a part of the original vision.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had to, they had to be themselves, but they had to figure out how to be something different.
Right.
And
So,
I don't think it was being something different so much as expressing themselves in a different way. They held on to their culture, but they transformed their culture by sharing it with those who saw value in it.
mhm.
Many people would come to them in so-called their golden years to experience the peace and the value of the Amish life. And so they knew that their values was a core value that people appreciated, and they just looked to find a way to express it in a different way. Instead of keeping it close to I'll use the term close to the chest, they decided to revise their culture by expressing themselves in the larger community as theater, as restaurants, as samples of
exactly, they started to sell their culture.
right.
That's right.
That's not what they had done before.
Right.
Exactly.
They wouldn't believe in doing that before, but they realized in order to survive, they had to be willing to share it with others rather than keep it to themselves.
All right, so this is great in terms of that story's really triggered a lot for us. And then he goes ahead and he talks about the Jesus story of releasing resources. He talks about this Appalachian community that because of their faith in the future, because of the way they trusted people, etc., they changed from a food desert to a food hub. Is that what he called it?
Oasis.
Yes.
Wait,
And And then the part that he spent the most time on is this grief and prophetic imagination that we started to pull into the Amish story as well. So what is he, what, when you look at that center section there, what resonates with you there in terms of grief and prophetic imagination? Yes. What was that?
Well,
laughter
there's
about?
a real, I don't know what, honesty or you're really present in the community if you're experiencing the grief. And then out of that, only, he makes a point, I believe, only from that posture are you able to make a prophecy that's going to stick, that's going to work for people. Because they know you're grounded in the common grief, or people can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
struck me too, that it was helping people acknowledge their grief,
Mm-hmm.
and first of all, see it and then acknowledge it. And I was really interested in what rituals help people to do that.
Mhm.
Well, how do we acknowledge our grief?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
Well,
of the-
I remember the story he told about the church where they met this elderly lady who talked about sitting in the pew for 64 years.
66 years, yeah.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
66, whatever the amount was. And then going on and telling the story how maybe a new pastor would want to put in chairs in order
Instead
to
of pews.
attract
Yeah.
the millennials or to give a more emphasis to community than the pews that may hinder people from coming to church, but also recognizing the heritage and the life that those pews might mean to the older congregation, and the fact of seeing their child baptized or their children married there or burying a loved one, and recognizing the fact that those pews have much more deeper meaning than just a piece of wood that you sit on before removing them and replacing them with chairs. I thought that was a great story of how to acknowledge someone's attachment and also grief of having to let go of something that was so meaningful to them, but needed to be let go in order to move into the future.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, if I
Mm.
could just, can I add one very personal comment now? What this chapter did for me, which surprised me, was I realized how much grief I have about the Order Ecumenical.
Mhm.
I wasn't even there in 1988 when it folded.
Yeah.
And the other thing I realized is, I have a lot of grief about what didn't happen that we'd hoped would happen. But I also realized I carry all of it within me.
Mm.
Mhm.
It's amazing how much of it I carry around at so many levels, and how
Mm.
grateful I am that I had that experience with all of you and that I'm having it right now.
Mhm.
I kept thinking the same thing. So,
You didn't say it.
I haven't. I kept thinking, okay, we had all these methods and everything. What didn't we do in this process to,
Mm.
or maybe, or unless you say, okay, what's happened has been the transformation into the new. But I keep wondering, what might we have done differently? Maybe not.
Well, I think of it more from the perspective of what has bubbled up. I mean, the listserv is remarkable. if that's your, a way to connect. I know of 2 or 3 Zoom groups that meet monthly and just share and exchange what's happening in their lives, and sometimes doing a study or something edgy, if you will. And maybe the directory, I think, is a piece of a ritual that we have in place. Well, Mike, we need a little help with it right now, but I kind of feel that things have bubbled up to answer that. And for me, if someone's, kind of whining about there's not ever been an acknowledgement, I kind of say to them, well, think of something, do it. I mean, what could hold you back from making something happen? Take your vacation in an HDP and tell us about it. I mean, there's so many possibilities, and this study being another one.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be so harsh, but I do think rituals have bubbled up for us, and I saw this happen in our church too.
It just, as I mentioned, I'm switching a little bit, but on this eve of this eve of an election, and the fact that Arizona is labeled as a hotbed for election deniers, I just think to myself, there's a huge amount of grieving going on, and it's not acknowledgeable in any of the public media. It's all caught up in, we're going to move forward, and I had a conversation with this guy was helping out a truck, and he was talking about the pastor in that church, and how, I don't know his word, how scared the pastor is, and it has to do with his training and his sense of responsibility as a theological minister, and his wanting to hold on to the United States as some good thing. And there's no way to have that conversation. There's no way to do the ritual. The other thing I thought of while I've got the air is about 4 years ago, going to the building in Chicago to help with the archives. And there was Ruth Gilbert all by herself down in the basement in that room where all our crap was stored, going through the last of the stuff and saying, who does this belong to? I'm going to call him and send it to him. And that was a ritual.
Yeah, it
And
was.
we're going to
It
wrap
definitely
this
was.
up now finally.
Exactly.
I'm complete.
Exactly.
I think the thing that caught me in that center slide, Karen, was that whole thing of imagining a future. I do think that's so critical in these times, because I think you can easily go into despair today about the future. I mean, are we going to have a future? Right? It's a real question. Are we going to have a future?
Exactly.
So that caught me going through this time.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell what caught me, because I put it in caps, was prophetic imagination. And he says that when you have this, you have emotional, social, and spirit skills. And I thought, well, I wonder what he has in mind there. And then he says that this needs to be our vocation. I thought that was very interesting. And he used the word vocation to keep alive the ministry of imagination. And so, I had no idea, of course, that and I want that grief would be our where we would center in on this, but this is very good. This is exactly what you want to have happen in the study, isn't it? Anyway, Jill, you had a comment, and then we'll move on from this. I think you were going to say something. Would you like to share now?
I think I was just going to say that the methods have infiltrated, I'm going to say, into
Society.
so many arenas that I can see.
Mm.
And
So we do have social and spirit skills, don't we? In so
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna have go ahead.
Can
One
I-
more.
I think there's one more piece is back at the Amish conversation and releasing resources, et cetera, was around who is the we? And therefore, there was a piece on just resource or something anyway, that the we is what you're out to care for as you move into that prophetic vision. And so part of his challenge is you have to choose, you have to decide the we, whether it's your church or your whole community or this county or whatever, but the we is an important part of the question, because then that's who you're living into caring with. I'm complete.
One of the things that I thought about was, Walt Brueggemann was one of my professors,
Mm.
and he was one of the folks from outside of our denomination who truly stood with us. When I'm a graduate of Christ Seminary, Seminex, and in 1974, 770 out of the 800 students and 47 of the 50 faculty members walked off the campus in St. Louis, Missouri, and never returned.
Never.
Wow.
And because we refused, we felt the gospel was at stake, and we refused to bow to a board of control that was, not being open to the way that our professors were teaching the scriptures. And but
So-
Walt was one of the, and so this was a process of immense grief,
Mhm.
not just for ourselves, who were seminarians at that time, but we were, when you graduated from our seminary, they handed you a piece of paper, and that was your life, basically. You were in the club from that point on.
Mm.
But to walk away from that and to say no, that we have to leave that behind, because there's something greater, there's something more for us that we have to do, and we can't lean on that anymore, was something that Walt helped us to imagine.
So as you were talking, Martine, it for me makes prophetic imagination come alive. It was disruptive but liberating. It was an alternative consciousness.
Mm.
Brueggemann wrote a book about that, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
amazing. So this is a good transition to what I wanted us to think about in terms of these were his words, but how as you start saying to yourself, he is offering this as a practice of imagination for. He
Mhm.
says, I find myself saying that small community leaders like ourselves, we're in all these small communities that we're ordinary leaders. So what are the words that you use? Is imagination? Imagination is one, but what other words could you use to say I have a practice of, or I want to participate in a practice of visioning? I want to practice.
Visioning.
I want to practice that one really resonates, doesn't it? a practice of changing images. I mean, was he talking about changing images? He talked about transformation.
Yeah, he didn't, yeah.
Go ahead.
He didn't have examples quite of an image that changed, that made a change, but I'm thinking of a practice of, oh shoot, connecting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It has to
Yes.
do for me with the neighborhood and that
Yes.
kind of
Mhm.
Mhm.
rediscovery of
Mhm.
what is there.
What is the reality? And then creating a vision for it. Yeah.
Mm.
So when you think about your imagination, what triggers your imagination? You know,
Hmm.
who are the people that get your imagination stirred up? That help you get new ideas, and what triggers your imagination these days?
Discontinuity.
Okay.
Turning off the TV.
Ah, yeah. Turn it off and do something else, right?
Yeah.
Well, I put a plug in for TV. I'm going to put a plug in for PBS. I mean, I always say, thank God for PBS.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
So many
Mhm.
programs, Nova and so forth. Nova gets me going. I mean, sometimes I never thought about some of those categories, and then it just explodes your imagination.
Okay, so I'd like us to spend take 30 minutes or 20 minutes, then take the next 20 minutes in small groups and have us, I have several questions. I don't know which one of these is the most helpful. So I want you to just decide what you think, which one of these you want to focus on, or each one of you can focus on a different one. Just make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk in your group. So if we have 20 minutes and we got, the questions are, you could talk more about what triggers your imagination, but where's the need for imagination in the communities that you're participating in? Or how does imagination help you to be a leader? How does it help you to experience abundance? These are all practices, he says, of recovering the sense of abundance. And how do you think this is important? And especially for us who are, I think everybody on this call, maybe most people are over 60.
Yeah.
What does
I'm
it mean for
39
elders? For elders to have this as a practice. So do you think that, you could just choose one of those and warble on it a little bit in your group? We're all back.
This year.
So
Somebody.
just anybody from any of the groups, what would so anybody just say a word about a story or comment that would be helpful for the whole group to hear.
Well, one of the things from group one that struck me, I think Luigi might have said it, but the way he said that, the realization of possibility in the situation, it's seeing that possibility in every situation. And of course, those of us from involved with the Institute, and even if we haven't been, maybe we've been involved with that, but to me, that's an important point in terms of imagination. You just continue to see the possibility, no matter how bad it looks, and it is, you see the possibility. That struck me from what Luigi said.
And listening to the voices that might be raising that up.
Yeah.
Voices in unexpected places sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe we are the megaphones for those voices, or the sharers of those voices and supporters of those voices.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, yeah.
another group.
Mhm.
Okay, no problem.
The way we had several really good stories. Paul, if you could retell yours, that would be great. But the other place, space we ended our conversation on was around respecting grievance.
Mm,
That you need the visioning piece, which is around imagination. You need the exploration of possibility, which is around imagination. But the transition between the two is the grievance piece, and that as a universe, as a personal experience, I have this difficulty. In dialogue, you always speak with I, just in case others don't have the same experience. I experience letting go, respecting my grievance and letting it go is very difficult. So I either get stuck in grievance or I get stuck in pretending I don't have grievance. But rather than acknowledging the grievance and having a mechanism by which to honor the fact that it exists. Anyway, so that's where we ended up. But Paul told a great story to start our sharing.
By the way,
I was-
Bill, that's called lament.
Yeah. Right.
I was
That's
just talking about the effort lately of trying to replace the mural that is across the street from the Kemper Building,
mm,
which is about Uptown, and that went through this process of collecting information and experimenting with images and drawing, and not just myself, but other people drawing pictures and that kind of traditional artistic approach. Yet there's this process that so ended up with this image that now people, I mean, it's been in the south-facing sunshine for 10 years or so, and it's falling off the wall. And so, but there's real more than interest in getting it replaced in a current, finally, a current technology of printing on vinyl and putting it back up in its original state. But that it's talked about finally getting to talk to the actual owner of the wall that it's on, and the problem with getting permission. But the guy said he was really liked it. And I know we've talked with the Chamber of Commerce in Uptown. They all like it, and the mayor of Chicago likes it, and everybody likes it, but it just isn't getting done. We just kind of come to this spot where we can't quite get it over the hill. And I'm in a role that I'm not used to playing. I just usually have something to create and do, and other people take care of all that
Exactly.
Public thing.
But I do
And-
know that Paul did tell the man about it and said it would cost $5,000, and
Yeah.
he said, okay, I'll pay for it.
Yeah, he said he would pay for it. So, and that's where we're sitting right now, just trying to get it. Of course, now it's winter time, and we've got to let this go through the season. And doing that kind of work in the winter, he told me, was not, probably more difficult. But anyway.
Okay, so I welcome Ronnie. Glad to see you.
Late.
No problem. We're moving into our last act here, which is, as I've been looking at this book, I've said, now I would like at the end of this study, however many weeks we do it, 12 chapters, to have 12 practices as an ordinary leader that I want to practice out of this book. Okay. So I find that when I made my list of what practices I'm involved in, some of them were these and some of them were other practices, but I want to come up with my own practices. So I would like us to take a few minutes and individually, just hopefully you have a sheet of paper to just jot some notes down of thinking about, I'm going to put this in the chat, I think. Let's see if I can do it in the chat. How do I want to practice imagination in the next 3 months? in terms of strengthening it or recreating it in my life, and maybe even using a different term. Maybe you want to use the practice of connection. Maybe you want to use the practice of visioning as your practice. So I would like us to suggest that we take 3 minutes to just think, no talking for 3 minutes, to just think about how this can become a practice for you in terms of strengthening it, recreating it in your own life, and then just share anything that has come out of your thinking about this practice before we close. So let's take the next 3 minutes to think about this question.
Mhm.
Sometimes 3 minutes seems a long time. Sometimes it seems like a short time. If we could be all unmuted. So just anybody, what are some of the reflections you have on this practice at this point?
I like your questions for each and doing it for each practice.
Mm.
So I'll start now that you've suggested it.
Those that we did in our group you're talking about?
Yeah, clarify what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact that you,
Oh, just this last question we were working on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, it has 3 questions in it. I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
How do we practice this in the next 3 months or strengthen and recreate it in our lives?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
I had, are you done? Is it done all right? I had, since many of us are in the 4th lifetime on the call.
80 or older. Mhm.
Well, okay. I use,
No, that's the 60 or older.
I use,
Thirty-nine
all
or
different
older.
ways. I use 75 and over, but that's okay. There's all different models for that. Later in life, anyhow, the last one. Okay. I think that the whole thing of the role of elder is got me going with that, in that discussion.
Mm.
And for me, one of the roles, there's a lot of roles there, but one of the roles is stirring the imagination in myself, and
Mm.
others I work with. How
Mhm.
do I keep that stirred? I like the verb there, is stirred imagination. Sometimes I think it comes that way.
Mhm.
You get stirred up from something, a song. I've gotten stirred up by it's just one song. It just did something to me.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's I would add it's how I keep that practice over the years.
Okay, maybe 1 or more comments and then we'll close.
Well, I think creating community in a new and different way. For example, I have a community on the internet. I do a lot of Zoom calling and coaching with colleagues that are taking some basic coaching courses that I'm taking and relating to people in different parts of the world. Like I have people that I connect with every week from some in Austria, some in Italy, some in South Africa, some people in California or New York. The internet has given us the possibility of creating a worldwide community and to see and to really bring into reality and fruition that we are a member of a global community and not just our local community.
Yeah, great. Okay, and let's close with Marshall's just posted one. Do you want to say a word, Marshall, or shall we just read it?
Read it.
Okay, so practicing deep listening. Giving gracious attention to the still small voice within and beyond the limits of human interaction, as well as attending to individuals' verbal and nonverbal messages and to what is implied and to what is not being said.
Mm.
And I would add to that, there is an implied gift in every meeting that you attend.
Mm.
If you can tune into what that gift is, that is maybe something people can't really get or see. And maybe not you, but somebody else could get it. That would be even better.
Okay, so we had a couple more that came in. Nurturing the element of surprise and its power from Ronnie, and being present to voices that are generally not honored from Martine.
Mm.
And I'm turning it back to Jim Weigel.
So if there's anybody here that's really excited about doing guiding a chapter next week, would you please put your hand up?
The Mary Sue.
All right. So next week, we're going to do we're gonna do chapter 8 on grounding,
What?
and I'll be the guide. Martine was gonna go on organizing, but he has a conflict. And I checked with Evelyn and Larry, and they need to do their chapter on hospitality on the 21st. Am I have that right? On the 21st, because life is complicated. And then Martine will say, can you do the 28th?
Yes.
And so say again, what are we studying next week?
Grounding. There
Grounding.
was plenty of grass in that place and they sat down.
We're not doing
What's
organizing.
your question, Joe?
So that's chapter 8
Yeah,
for next week. Okay.
Okay.
and,
We're
and just,
gonna
go ahead, Joe.
be traveling. So we can't promise that we'll be here next week.
But we'll do
We'll-
our
We'll
best
do our best, but we'll be out of
out of town.
in San Diego.
Well, all right. They may have internet in San Diego. We never can tell.
Well, we bring our
probably do,
computer.
but-
That's not the problem. It's what's going on at the
Yeah.
time with our friends that we're visiting.
You'll
We
be
have
you'll be practicing several of these practices there with your friends, right?
Right.
Mostly celebrating our friend's 80th birthday.
Yeah, and creating a
Oh.
new imagination for their future.
Mm,
We have meetings on alternate weeks, so we won't be here next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks.
We'll read the chapter though.
I think we should clap for Paul. He's been on and off this with wrong emails for several weeks and we finally got him connected.
Hey,
Yay.
thanks to Karen and Jim for coordinating this.
Great
This was,
leadership.
Great, great
this
class.
didn't this start off really good and it just kind of went up and just kept buzzing? It was really wonderful, I thought.
Good to see
Good
you.
group, good group.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
That comes from trained leadership.
It also comes with people doing their homework.
Yeah, I'm reading the chapter.
Exactly.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Short chapters help too.
Make sure you
Yeah.
vote tomorrow
All right, yes.
in the United States. And
Keep that imagination going after the election results.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Think positive.
That's right.
that's right.
Take
So
care.
Last
Take care,
week,
everybody.
Martine and Sharon and I had a wonderful long conversation. So if anybody wants to hang out and chat, you're certainly welcome to hang out and chat.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
All
you.
right. See y'all. Take care.
I'm
Bye-bye.
afraid we have
So long.
another meeting.
Yes, we have another meeting.
Take care. We love you.
See ya.
Jim, I won't be able to, so I'll miss next week.
I'm sorry?
I'll miss next week.
Yeah. So, Marshall, could you say a word about, you made some comment about the jurisdictional meeting in Lake Junaluska and how different it was or something. And then you didn't really expand on that. I'd be
Well,
interested.
First of all, in the United Methodist Church, the U.S. part of the church is divided into 5 geographic regions. There's the Northeast, the North Central, the West, the South Central, and the Southeast. I'm in the Southeastern jurisdiction, which is generally the southeastern part of the country. And they meet typically every 4 years at Lake Junaluska. And because of COVID, everything was delayed, and they finally had an out of rhythm, out of season meeting in this month in order to elect 3 new bishops because so many of the bishops had hit mandatory retirement age. And bishops were having to cover more territory than normal. So they did elect 3 bishops. And what is unique about what's going on in the church in the United States is in 2019, there was a general conference that voted down the Council of Bishops' proposal for what is called a one church plan. And instead of that, they put in a very nasty, mean-spirited plan called a traditional plan. And that was done only because of the votes from the African United Methodist delegates. And there was a general rebellion throughout the United States following this 2019 General Conference. And out of the rebellion that happened, the individual annual conferences, for the first time ever, voted in a more progressive slate of delegates. And the conservatives got voted out. So this is the first time that the progressive and centrist delegates got to meet as jurisdictions. And they were able to vote in a slate of new bishops who were just remarkably different because they came from a different segment of the church that are all progressive and centrist. Okay, now that sounded very complex to me, but I made it as short and simple as I could. Okay. Now, Ronnie, I'm not hearing what you just said. You're muted.
I'm sorry. What happened to the African section?
The Africans are organized in central conferences, and they're meeting on a separate schedule. And that's not even fully in my head. And to quote a famous line from a movie, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Gotcha. Right. Interesting.
Thank you.
So in a nutshell, one of the amazing things that happened in the Western jurisdiction is for the first time ever, we got a Filipino-American bishop.
Wow.
Who was born in the Philippines, ordained in the Philippines, and then served in Alaska of all places. And now he's a bishop out of Seattle. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I'm confused. And then there was a married gay black man elected bishop, and he's going to Seattle. And then there was a Latinx woman elected bishop.
Wow.
Thank you.
Was that too much information?
No, that's great. I haven't really kept up with that. So Ronnie, you'll be the, I suppose I should just send you the link to the video and you could clean it up and edit it and catch up.
If I had, I don't want to learn that particular software, but yes, I definitely will watch it. Sorry, I was late.
Oh, I'm sure you were doing something worthwhile.
I thought maybe it was a time change.
No, it wasn't that simple. As it turns out.
All right, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, me too,
Good night,
but
folks.
good night. Take care. Good to see you.